right, it's time for another weekly live stream. Welcome to the live stream and Happy New Year. Tonight, so I did a live poll, or I did a poll for the live stream, and I think we decided, let's see where'd it go. Yeah, looks like we decided we're working on world generation stuff. I think we got like 4 votes for that, 2 votes for that, and 1 vote for that. So that's what we'll do. Where we left, so of course I still like not showing you anything. Okay, so there's my patrons. Thank you to my patrons. Okay, so yeah, so the poll showed, yep, we're going to be working on world generation stuff, and yeah, as I said before, 4 people voted for that, 3 for this, and we had a couple in chat that seemed interested in world generation or working off the release checklist, but I think world generation is what we'll work on tonight. It's kind of what I've been working on all week. You can see if I move this down and minimize that, you can see like this was a image of plotting rivers. I'm doing a new river algorithm. I had one before that would plot really long, big rivers. But the scale of this map is deceiving. Each of these big tiles is 16, I'll call them Mythruna kilometers, the 1,024 meters, right? 1,024 meters. And so these rivers, even though these little streams or rivers or whatever they are, they look really close and really short, but they actually are very long. Each of these hexagons is about a day's worth of travel, meaning if you were to walk if you were to walk at normal speed, or I think maybe even run at normal speed, sunrise to sunset, it would take you to cross one of these. So these are it's a pretty spread out distance. And with the other rivers, it took them a long time to calculate, and potentially minutes, right? Minutes to calculate, because it was doing proper pathfinding, and it wouldn't always produce great results. And I was just afraid that the maps would sometimes, it's all random, right? So maps might get into a situation where rivers would generate and it would just take so long for them to resolve that it wouldn't even be worth it. And then it still left me with the problem of where do I put streams and lakes and ponds and things. And so I started with a different approach. I'll load the mapper tool, which I'm going to leave this little map down here because that's what we'll be working on in a minute. So let's load the mapper tool and let it load. And you can see as we start here, it's loading the map, and then it's going to start generating all the rivers. It's generating the map fractal because it's doing samples to sample the world for that, these 9 16 by 16 kilometer tiles called a sedectile. Actually, I'll talk about nomenclature in a minute. Which is rivers 2 plotting. And so just in that amount of time, it was able to plot all of these little streams and things, streams and rivers, and because these really are like quite long. Like, even though this guy down here looks short, if we go in, this is a big town that I move around with a ship, and it's quite long. There's still some, yeah, and I couldn't believe it. Like, you could see if I zoom in really close here, these are the size of blocks and things, and so you can kind of get an idea of scale, but you still really can't. And so I ended up making it so that this would dump a file of all the generated rivers. Don't get me wrong, there's still problems with these, and these are the rough rivers, right? When they are actually plotted, it would use local terrain to figure out. That's another story. But my brain just couldn't believe that these wouldn't be just like you'd be tripping over streams and rivers every time you walked 2 feet. And so I exported all of these sample streams into a file so that I could load them into a Mythruna world, this same Mythruna world, and see how they worked. So that's what I've been working on this week. Lots of tweaking. This generally works by sampling the world and sampling the world at regular intervals, not at meter intervals. So it samples every 100. So yeah, these are 128 meters apart. So it samples a rough layout of the world and then runs through a few iterations of kind of an erosion algorithm where it decides for each of these points which way the water would flow, and then gives water to its neighbors based on slope and things, and then it determines how much water would have collected there. And so whenever you see these little blue marks, those are the ones that exceeded some threshold, that they have a certain amount of water, and any of these ones with red and green were potential creek or stream sources, meaning that not only did they have a reasonable amount of water, but also many things flowed into them. So multiple sides, like this one, this hill would have flowed into it, this hill probably would have flowed into it, this one flowed into it, and maybe even this direction flowed into it. So it had a high number of counts for flow. Anyway, so their way to start river sources, and then uses the terrain and the other sampling that it did to decide where to put these rough rivers. And there's a lot of work to do as far as going back and seeing when they're close together like this, could we join them? When they get into these sort of, they fell back on themselves, maybe that's where we put a pond or a marsh, because it's very wet, relatively speaking, especially like these where it goes zigzag. Some of this will be alleviated when these are proper rivers and they'll be able to detect when they're backtracking. At any rate, when I was working on this, I discovered that there was a bug in how I was calculating temperature and wetness, which is what I call weather, basically average rainfall, if you want to think of it that way. We over the break, we went into, I had a special one talking about fractals and how I use those to generate the terrain. I use fractals to generate the climate as well. So actually I can show you. So let's go down, and what happens is that for each point on the world, you can ask for its elevation, its wetness, like what its weather is, what's average precipitation, and its average temperature, and also vegetation capability, which is more like soil quality or something, I don't know. And what this mapper tool does is it uses that combines elevation, weather, climate, and weather to determine what color to make it. So if it's really dry and hot, it makes it desert colored, and if it's different things. And so my brain said, this area is really dry. Why do I get all these streams? And it turns out it's not really dry. It was just hot, and or reasonably hot. And actually what it is that my coloring is just a little off. But it was during that I discovered it's something very important. I had always assumed that my fractals were returning between -1 and 1. So we'll keep notes on what I'm talking about here. I had one open. So normalize the weather related fractals. So I thought that the fractals were returning between -1 to 1, but what they were actually doing is returning -1 over square root of 2 to 1 over square root of 2. And I discovered this when I was trying to map actually we will want to map them to anyway, -1 to 1, but I'm going to map them to from 0 to 1. It's what we really want, 0 to 1, because we want 0 to be the coldest, 1 to be the hottest, and so on. And I figured this out when I was trying to look at different places and say, well, why isn't this desert? And so I mapped that 0 to 1. I went and did some research and decided, okay, these are the values I want for Mythruna. What is Mythruna's minimum temperature? I think I have, we can put that in the notes file. I think we've searched for Celsius. Nope. I thought for sure it's in the river stuff. So I did some research and I decided that the coldest would be -20 and the hottest would be 50 Celsius. Celsius range of map. So we're going to map the temperature to Celsius range of -20 to 50. And so then anything over 40 or so would be desert. And where that comes in is even if you've got basically whatever precipitation you've got, once you get over 40 Celsius, it'll start to subtract from whatever weather you get, wetness. And so I mapped that and looked at rainforests and what their rainfall was and gave up with some ideas for that. Yeah, so these are what I currently do for this mapper tool to kind of come up with the coloring. I need to port all of that to Mythruna because we get deserts in Mythruna in places where we shouldn't have deserts. Really, this should be, unfortunately, in this particular map, this is the only area of desert, but if we were to load it up and go here, right now Mythruna's world is making all of this desert. In fact, why don't we go see, I believe anyway that this is desert. Let's find one of these particularly interesting rivers. Okay, let's come over here and we'll see how much of a desert this is. So we'll keep track of this. Take a screenshot. Go ahead and close this app for the moment. And start up the thing. So we've got the coordinates. Alright, let's go over into Mythruna for a second. We'll be able to show you the straight line silly rivers I've done that map to this map. You'll get to see a little bit of the latest terrain fractal and what I'm contemplating doing next with that as well. I'm trying to get this more finalized before I do another release, which I hope to do this weekend or next weekend. And I've said that like last week, but so right now I'm sitting on top of a skull, one of those big skull caves. Let's go ahead and it's going to be too dark for YouTube. Okay, so we've got bright stuff. So this is the current world fractal, which is pretty cool. It makes these spiky mountains and has, in some cases, wide open plains, which is something old Mythruna never did. And it bothers me in some cases, like literally there are sections of the world where if you're standing, flat ground is all you can see as far as you look. And I sort of feel like I should bump it up a little bit, but there really are places in the world that are that flat. And when there's extra vegetation, this will have, different levels of tall grass, bushes, flowers, potentially all that kind of stuff depending on, the vegetation. And so that'll break it up quite a bit. But these when I first tried it and I was walking around and I'd get to these flat sections where it was just like lots of buildings and totally flat terrain, it kind of bothered me. But anyway, so I'm okay with, I'm not going to mess with that until I have vegetation and more vegetation. So I'll at least get, the grasses in and maybe some flowers. I'm just going to see if anybody's on. Yep. Oh yeah. Looks like we got 2. Welcome to the live stream. Okay. So here's one of the straight rivers. Let me show you on the map where we are on this map over here. So right now we are in this little area right here. There's this little horseshoe shaped river, and if you look on this map, yeah, see we're right here in this area. You actually can't see the rivers in this particular view because they're obscured. You can see straight line here, part of a river. It's kind of hard to see, but if we fly up, you'll see, yeah, so here's that horseshoe-shaped river that runs around like this. You can kind of see it runs around here like this. And so you can see how big that is compared to, you know, what we have on this little map right here. And the reason I was in this area is because up here in the mountains it generated some cool rivers. Of course, they're completely bogus right now. I just wanted to see size-wise and so on. So if we go over here, we had one that made it all the way to the ocean, which is kind of cool. But right now I made them really thin. They don't keep track of how much flow there is or anything like that, so they're very thin little rivers, fixed depth, and really, you know, 128 meter spans, and so they do these weird kind of terrain cuts, and they look really stupid. But I was, again, just trying to figure out how they lay out on the land. In reality, you know, that first pass, we'll talk about that hopefully, that first pass that lays out this map over here, so this is confusing if I do that. So the one that lays out this map, the rivers on this map, is dealing, you know, with large sections of the terrain, and so it's kind of just roughing in the rivers so that when we go to generate, you know, these 1 kilometer squares, we know that there are rivers that intersect that, and then we can use the actual terrain, because we just had to load it to generate that tile, you know, the elevation for the far terrain and so on. Then we will use that to plot, to plot the actual rivers, you know, around obstacles and, you know, maybe some random meandering for these kind of really flat plains. So anyway, but I just wanted to show real quick. I'm kind of trying to fly multi-keyed here. So yeah, it does some crazy carving. I wrote the river algorithm so that it would overcome, or the, you know, the river carving algorithm so that it would overcome any kind of issues where it made mistakes. But it also creates some really interesting things. So in this case, I have the influence set really tight, but if it happens that the river generator decides it wants to make a span across open space like this, it will build up the terrain next to it. And normally you'd set a wider influence, so it would kind of like build a hill up to it. And there's another issue. I think we cross a tile boundary here because it chops off and doesn't actually do the influencing on this side. So it thinks it doesn't actually involve this tower. Anyway, this tile. So if we scooch through here, we're about to hit a neat view anyway. If I come over here, it carves right through, stops right there. Yeah, so that's where that river starts. And again, it cuts off because I'm not calculating the tiles. We get this cool view, especially at night. Like we get to see the, there's a bunch of buildings hanging out over there. Like the building algorithm is also crazy right now because there's so much flat land now, and the simple building placement was just, you know, the test placement, and it was just set up to any flat terrain. It randomly decides, hey, can I put a building here? And since there's so much flat terrain now, it really puts them out. But it's a great test for the engine. If we were to let's see, we fly up. So there's another river that generated up here in the mountains, and that one's going to be kind of cool because it might have some waterfalls and things. But yeah, so see, you can see all of these things. And if I was to load the settings screen and toggle those on and off, you can see we're seeing a lot of really far buildings. All right, so back to what we were going to do, which is look at the desert stuff and the climate. And that means we need to warp over to another place. Yeah, it builds aqueducts. Yeah, and it eventually will build tunnels too, so, or caves. So if it determines, you know, from the rough algorithm, if it determines like that it needs to cross some place that there's a hill, and that hill is like too high, above some threshold where it decides it can carve it out, Eventually it'll just put a cave there so that it can make a river through a cave. That is the plan. What was I doing? Oh yes, I need to load, need to look at this so we can see where we're going to warp to. We're sitting here in the forest. Alright, so let's warp over to what I think is desert in Mythruna but shouldn't be. And I could be wrong. 9983. So the other thing is I'm going to zero out the coordinates right now. Instead of starting at a million, it'll re-zero out to. So we are warping. Trust me, it's got to do some. Like if we. Yeah, there we go. Whoa, he's going crazy. There we go. Ruh-roh. Oh yeah. There's a some of the logic that updates the local lighting for the player still sends a slow round trip request to the server and will occasionally block the UI when we make these huge changes. Yeah, see, there's that river that loops back on itself. We're super high right now. We're almost 400 meters in the air on terrain that's only 7 or 8 meters tall above sea level. There we go. Oh no, I guess it's taller than I thought. 138 meters above sea level. Alright, it's going to get dark here, so let me yeah, desert gets super bright during the day. Alright, let's go ahead and lock the time so we get like daylight. Yeah, and with the live stream going and the background generation of terrain, but see, this made essentially a desert. And it's not really dry enough to be a desert. It should be, you know, I'm going to make a sort of brown grass for dry areas. So this would be brown grass and dirt and not desert. It makes for some cool looking terrain, but really these should not all be deserts, which is why the algorithm allowed rivers to generate here, because it is wet enough to generate some streams at least, right? But so anyway, we let you can sometimes kind of see the rivers. Yeah, see little vague lines in here, and yeah, you can see this little guy right here. It makes that. So we're getting there. But that's where I discovered that the temperature and weather and stuff were not normalized, because I was never seeing maximum temperature, minimum temperature. It was always stopping at 0.7 or so, which is a considerably more mild climate than I had intended. So if we look over here, let's see, I keep doing that. Let's pop that up because it doesn't cover the whole screen. I think if we look back over here at our map, this is roughly where we are, right? So we got this weird like V shape with a little triangle, and I think that's that river we were looking at. So we've got the V shape with the little triangle, and that V stretches all the way over there and all the way back up here. But if I were to actually try to walk along that, yeah, ignore the fact that, you know, terrain doesn't render correctly for water. So you see, these are quite big sections of river, stream, canal, whatever you want to call it. And so even just standing here gives you a better idea of the scale. So I'm really glad I did this, because I would have probably tweaked the algorithm a lot. I do want to go back, and so I still got to mess with rivers. That's not going to make it into this release, this next release. It'll come along with some other stuff. But even to integrate it, I've got to work on, you know, the sedactile level generation, which is one of the things we'll talk about. That's one of my next steps. But, you know, it's getting there. I have to, you know, do some passes to see. Like, I want to do a pass to see if rivers are close to the water but don't join the water. It'll make them go ahead and go to the bottom. But to do that, I have to have plotted the bodies of water out, which I do have an algorithm for as well. So you know that this is the same body of water and so on. All that's coming, but I'm concentrating on trying to get the last bits of this fractal at least usable, so that I can make a release. I have to do a bunch of things that break all the existing worlds, and I'm going to try to get all that stuff into this release so that I can upgrade fractals in the future without breaking existing worlds. Okay, so we decided this is not right. These probably should not be deserts. If we look back at, I'm going to go ahead and exit out here. We'll go back into the mapper tool for a second, because it is way less resource intensive. And we'll try to go to the same location. Yeah, so we had the V shape. Yeah, so like this river is quite long. And when they split like this, it's because two rivers fed in. So really, like, any of these green-red things were starts, and then they kind of joined up. So there's going to be some logic that figures out what to do in those cases. So if we go back over here to our weird little V thing that we found up here. You get good at spotting things from the air after a while. But what I can do is go and tweak the scripts to show the samples and kind of what ranges they are. So in here, if we go, where is the, yes, this is all just random scripting I was doing. Like this shows all the samples. This I think just shows how the samples are spread out. And so it's running that right now. I build in all these sort of debug markers in. Yeah, so this is showing how often we sampled, of course with really long values, because at some point I couldn't see them and thought they needed to be long. But somewhere down here I show when we're sampling it, if true, so that shows the wet color and the temp color. Oops, that was a false, need true. So if we do that, and yes, that's the other thing, it kind of keeps track of the direction of flow. So these are all the sampled points. And the color of the mark, so the middle one, let's see, the middle one, why do I have two? Okay, minus 10. Okay, I see. minus 10. So these, I don't know why I have two wet colors. I think I was playing with different things. At one point left a line behind. So these are the wet colors, and this is the temperature color. And temperature color shows up as yellow if we're, sort of between 0 and 25 degrees Celsius. If we're less than 0, it shows up as cyan, which we won't see anywhere over here. And if we're greater than 40, like arid desert type, then it shows up as red. And we won't see any of the red over here. This red is something different. That's not the same. We won't see any red over here. But if we were to go and look down at one of these really dry corners over here, we start to see red show up. So see this area is really arid, but it's also very wet. But it just remains to be seen. So regarding the question in the chat, the version that you guys play with, the rivers are generated kind of in a dumb way. It's just basically every 1024 by 1024 tile, it will always generate a river from the highest point in that tile and follow the terrain, sometimes bordering the tile in really strange ways because it can't leave the tile because it's generated specific to that tile. And so sometimes you'll get like these really straight ones that are bordering the tile in a very strange way. But it tries to go downhill until it can't go downhill anymore. And so especially up in the mountains, it'll pick the highest point there and then typically head straight downhill all the way to the edge of the tile and then just stop. So yes, that's expected, but that's just bogus. I was just testing that rivers carved properly, and by doing one every tile, I never had to walk very far to see one, and there was all kinds of interesting, crazy edge cases that it had to handle in order to make that even work. Anyway, back to what I'm talking about here. So this is arid desert, and it's also very wet, and so some part of the algorithm is going to subtract. In fact, I think this is what I'm doing here, right? We've got this is the natural wetness. This green bar is the native wetness, and this shorter green bar is the wetness that's been adjusted for how hot we are. So I think we're just a little over 40 degrees, and so we've lowered this wetness to the effective wetness to be that. If we were generating if we were working through this tile, it would be, of course, a lot drier, and similar to, over here we should get, oh good, we did get this over here. So this should be both dry and hot. No, see again, this is a problem with the algorithm. This is a little bit wet, but not very hot. Maybe rainforest temperatures, but dry. And so I don't think it would be desert, it would be brown. I don't think there are actually any desert areas within the range of these 9 tiles that we're generating. And so that's something I've got to work on. Here we have these, well, see, maybe this would be desert. It's super dry, even though it's not very hot. Red means that we have, red means precipitation less than 10, which I don't remember whether so if you have 100 inches of rain per year would be like 59 to 110. So 59 to 100 is like rainforest. Anything over 50, anything over 0.5 would be like rainforest levels of rain. And so if we're red, we're less than 10 inches of rain, we're getting into desert territory. So that's the other thing, is heat and dryness. So this actually might be a desert. We're not particularly hot, but we're super dry. So this might be a desert. And again, I would say it's colored wrong. So I need to fix the coloring. But as we fix the coloring here, I need to fix it over in Mythruna as well. I wanted to normalize the fractals. And we're halfway through, and I've still just been rambling on. So the other thing to get rivers working is we've got these tiles. This will cover rivers, caves, rivers covers caves, towns, roads. All the things will be generated at this, I call them a sedectile, which is sort of a made-up term that's tapping into 16 by 16 to try to come up with a name for a grid cell that's 16 by 16, because I needed a nomenclature that was unambiguous in Mythruna when I'm generating this stuff. Sedectile level generation is one of the things I have to work on. So sedectile is 16384 by 16384. And so it is essentially 16 tiles by 16 tiles, and a tile is 1024 by 1024. And we've talked before, a tile is 32 by 32 columns, and a column is 32 by 32 meters. So let's talk about meters. Okay, Sedectile level generation would decide the rough layout of a sedectile. So when we spawn in this sedectile, we've got to figure out not only the rivers in here, but we've got to figure out the rivers in our neighbors, because those rivers may spill over into us. So we can't just generate ourselves. We generate ourselves and spill into our neighbors, and we generate the neighbors enough so that they can spill into us. And that will also factor into where do we place towns, because, you know, it could be that a town candidate is really good right on the edge here because there's lots of natural resources over here, but the port is over here, etc. So, you know, cave generation may cross tiles, river generation may cross tiles, road generation will certainly cross tiles, town generation may cross tiles or sedectiles. And so at a high level, you know, low level, we generate terrain on little 32, we generate terrain by column, you know, little 32 by 32, or we generate it by tile if we're generating the far terrain that we can see from a distance. But the sedectile needs to happen first. So whenever we request a tile, we would have to say, oh wait, have I generated the, you know, rough morphology, you know, the caves and even trees potentially, rivers, roads, towns, etc. for this sedectile? No. Okay, well then I have to generate that for this one and partially for all of its neighbors before I can even generate the tile for the first time. And so you got to keep that fast. So it's got to be roughly, you know, pretty quick, because a lot of that's going to happen while the game is running. And then there's going to be some amount of queuing up in the background of, you know, when the game's not busy, you know, it might start queuing up to generate some of the ones surrounding it, just in case you cross this boundary. It won't have to do all that work because it's already finished generating these. And that is infrastructure I haven't put in yet, and that's why it's not in yet, which is why current rivers, buildings, etc. placement is dumb looking. It was good enough to test, but that's infrastructure I need to build. I need to do that this weekend, because in order to ship this fractal, I really kind of want to have that tied up. Although it is a reasonable test right now. It's just crazy because, you know, in different, you can't see it in here, but in different views, you see, you know, like 20 of those skull features, you know, the stone skulls. And really, if we were generating stuff at the sedectile level, we could say, you know what, if we generate things at the sedectile level, we could say, you know what, there should only be maybe one skull every 3 or 4 kilometers. You know, don't bother putting 20 in the same tile, and we, you know, there could be some larger. There's a whole set of rules I've written down for myself of, you know, there should be something interesting to look at within X meters. There should be another town within X meters. You know, that kind of thing. Roads should always have at least a day's travel between rest stops, meaning that there'll be at least an inn or a town along roads every day's worth of travel, that kind of thing. And so all that has to be built into, you know, the sedectile level generation. But first I have to have that infrastructure in to say, oh, I'm generating a tile, I need to ask for the sedectile that it's in because it doesn't exist yet, and build that out. Which is something I kind of hope to look into today, but I'm thinking maybe we just normalize the, we're looking at 939. Maybe just talk about normalizing the fractals and call this an educational live stream for that. So let's say, I'm trying to think how I want to do this. It was rivers that had so no, I did normalize the generation in here for the plus or minus square root of 2. Somewhere I have that. down here, yeah, I discovered it first by trial and error, which is why these are hard-coded like they are. And then discovered that mathematically it's, yeah, 1 over square root of 2 minus 1 over square root of 2. For the for some reason, so the other thing is because of how the fractals are layered, sometimes they will slip out. And in this case, for temperature, I discovered that by measurement, minimum was 0.69 or negative 0.69. But really, they're plus or minus square root of 2, and I can write a normalized function that does this all at once. And so that's what we'll do. It'll be part of the fractal util. Fractal utils. So we'll write a normalize method. Normalize. So normalize will turn a value in an arbitrary. Yes, kids, write your Java doc as you code. Turn a specified value in an arbitrary range into 0 to 1. To the range 0 to 1. So given a value and a min and a max. So given that value, we will copy code that already works. So it looks like this, but but we may not want to clamp it. Unclamped. The caller can clamp it, but there could be reasons you want to say, I want to pretend the minimum maximum is minus this plus this, but anything outside of that range should just continue with the same math, which, for example, would allow you to convert, like some arbitrary range of values into, anyway, Celsius and things, and have it still work outside of the range. So val plus equals min. No. That worked when I knew min was negative, but what we really want is val equals val minus min. And then we return val over max minus min, right? So, yeah. Right? So if min is like minus 5, yeah, so we then minus 5, which is saying it's plus 5, then abstract whole range. So that's what normalize should do. And so in theory, I can kill my oops, wrong way. Kill that for a second. I do this a lot where I'll pull back like this, and I'll take. Oh, I was going to show you guys the temperature fractals and weather fractals and how they work. So I have potential questions about that. So I took a screenshot of this, Zoom 2619. You know what? Let me do this real quick. Problem with taking the screenshot at an arbitrary location is I have to go back and find that location in order to take a comparable screenshot, and you'll see why that's important. So we'll let this run again, load its thing. I have a specific size I try to drag to. Ta-da! Come on. But all things considering it's generating the rivers for this much of the world, more than you would ever probably travel realistically within a really long period of time. That's pretty fast, especially since it sampled all of the terrain and knows now not just rivers, but it has a good sampling that will be used for plotting roads and and other things as well. So anyway, we're going to zoom out to here, like 3657. We'll remember that, 3657. So we've got a baseline terrain, and as we normalize these other things, we'll be able to see how we affected it. So we come over here. I need to compile that. Gradle run, or Gradle install. These libraries are available, again, early access to any patron. Even the $1 a month will get you access. You could clone the repo and then, you know, kill your thing if you really wanted to. Just have to ask for it. That I was not able to make that automatic. I don't know how to hook GitHub up to Patreon. Anyway, so we got normalize. Now we have that function. We can go over here and replace some of this code with val equals fractal utils normalize, and yeah, it's unfortunate. I actually created constants for this. Yeah, we'll do that here too. Double square root of 2 math square. I'm old school. To me, whoops, I only need the one. To me, like, calling square root is forbidden, right? In the old days, like, square root was a huge performance killer, and that's not so much true anymore. So minus square root to square root 2, and then we'll still clamp val to 0 to 1. So this should not have actually changed anything. This will potentially change something because I had handcrafted values here that I'm about to bypass for a proper range. So our temperatures might change, and we might see the fractals look different. And so we'll check. We shall check. Uh-oh, the cold beverage has emptied. All right. So we make it this tall exactly. But Paul, how do you know how tall you need to make it? Because it's exactly as tall as my editor. I think we zoomed out to 3657. Yep. Okay, so generation kind of borked, but so we'll do that, and then we'll come. I think I have a window already open in that directory. Yep. Spend a lot of time doing this, right? Yeah, so see, by renormalizing that, we end up screwing up a bunch of things that were super cold before, and now they're not. And it changed our river generation too. You can see through this area, our rivers changed because our temperature changed. So we may decide that we liked that old way better. It was definitely worth. It could just be a matter of changing what we mean by certain things. The other thing is it prints out max temperature, min temperature. So if we grep min temp from per log, so the min temperature we ever got to was only 0.26, and max temperature, yeah, so we steadily increased, but we never got above 0.75. It could be that I've screwed something up. So, well, to be sure, let's use the same values I was using before. And we'll see if we get better results. I could have left the tool running to do that. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Yeah, the scripts let you live edit them, which is kind of nice. That's why this tool is so useful. You can play with it, just see what happens. Come on. Okay, so the math is okay. I think maybe we got a little warmer than we were, but not horribly so. So let's do print screen there. Come back over here. So this one, yeah, so see, it used to be a lot colder. So we're still not getting to 0 like we did. See, we were super cold for a larger area, but it's also not clear that we were using the right algorithm. This may actually be more correct. Let's zoom in on this and see how the river's plotted out. Yeah, no, the river's... Okay, wait, we gotta wait for a train to jump in, but I think the river's turned out different. Better, worse, I don't know, just different. Because there used to be... This river would generate here, and then another one would generate here. So we've definitely changed something, and maybe not for the better. So let's check. This is what my life has been the past week, right? I make a small tweak that shouldn't have changed anything, and then it does change something, and I have to figure out. We should have gotten close to 1 max. Okay, that's close. And close to 0 min. We got close. Why did it change? So, first of all, let's pop back out to 3657. We can't get to exactly 3657. So we'll take a screenshot now, and we will put it back the old way, which shouldn't be any different unless my normalized math was messed up. So it's regenerating. You can see the logs spinning out there. I could have turned off river generation. This would have gone faster. But I'm kind of curious the differences. Yeah, so still going. 27 queued. Here we go. Come on. You can do it. Gosh. Math is frustrating sometimes. Come on, you can do it. Seems like it's taking longer this time. Or maybe I just had more to say last time. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah, it didn't change anything. So let's put this back the way it was. Because these are not exactly... Well, I think that is square root 2. Because everything's back the way it was before I started. I can actually go over here and put a right here. True return. Yeah, so we got rid of our rivers. Still building the other. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Okay, so it definitely did get brighter. So that's related to wetness, right? Because that was the other thing I changed. Which means, oops, wrong file. So that means the square root of 2 is not really this, or the math changed. Because that's the other thing we could try, is using my values directly. So if my math is right and normalized, this should not be any different. Take a screenshot real quick. Oh my gosh. I've done something very wrong. Yeah, so we'll see how this turns out, but I think my math is busted. There's probably some of you who are much better at math than me that have already spotted the error. But let's make it easier for you by pulling up the fractal util. Yeah, see, we're way, oh yeah, we're screwed. We screwed up majorly. Val equals val minus min. Should move it into min max. Maybe I'm calling it backwards. Min max. Oh, I left the other ones in, that's why. Duh. So somebody was definitely shouting at the screen. You should have said it in the chat. Of course, you're probably watching this in the future and shouting at the screen, "You idiot! You left the old code in. You and your weird commenting everything and leaving it in style. It's hard to tell." So this should put it back the way it was, presuming we haven't screwed something up. Something else up, anyway. Come on, come on, come on. Alright. Okay. Okay, so we're back to where we started, at least. If I do a print screen here, we should be able to go back over here. And yeah, those are the same. So if I use the same numbers, I get the same results. But if I do this, that means these are not the square root of 2. 2 to the power of 0.5, what can I say? Actually, this would do square root. Oh, divide, oh, 1 over, right. Set, clear. That's what it is. I'm an idiot. Yep. Yeah. I don't need square root of 2, I need 1 over square root of 2. So if I do this, still got our thing up. So should be able to do this. Yeah, I'm a big dummy. The problem is, like in the live stream, my brain is doing, 2 or 3 different things at once here. I'm trying to like chat and keep you guys entertained while think about the next thing and work on the problem. When I do this stuff by myself, I go through these cycles. They're much faster. Like I would have figured this out 5 or 10 minutes because I had 100% of my brain devoted to why I was being stupid instead of only 25% of my brain. So, plus I'm also a little stupider when I'm coding in these things. Partly why I'm a little happy I won't have time to dial into the sedactile stuff. So it would have been really educational for you all, but I'm thinking it'd be better if I just go over it when I'm done. And so we're going to end it here in a minute once I've confirmed that my normalize actually works. So we spent all stream basically working up to a normalize. Yeah, so nothing changed. This is actually working now, which means we ought to be able to change this one too, but we're definitely using different values over here. But this should actually be the same because these are the same values. So we get no difference here if everything's working right. And before I end, I will show you guys what the fractals look like because I have a question. If any of you have any ideas. To me, when you're wandering around the world, if you start out in a luscious green place, you ought to be able to think, if I walk north far enough, maybe really, really far, I'm eventually going to hit, frozen tundra. No matter what I do, if I walk north far enough, I should hit frozen tundra. If I walk south far enough, I should hit, arid desert land or rainforest, basically, essentially those two things, if you think about walking towards the equator. So the idea being that if somehow you generated a world, like in this case, right, nowhere nearby is desert. This might be desert. This might be desert. But like consistently, no matter what world I get generated into, is there a direction I could walk potentially for 20 days, and I will eventually hit frozen tundra no matter what, or desert / rainforest no matter what. So like if there's some place up here that's got a temperature band of 0 that stretches all the way across, and somewhere down here that's got a temperature band that runs much hotter. Anyway, it's just thinking about that and how far that should be away. I think it should be pretty far if such a thing exists. And of course it would repeat, so then you go again and you could walk another 30 days and get back to frozen tundra. Because fractals are weird when you're thinking about an Earth that wants to pretend it's round, but it's really not because it's endless in all directions. So yeah, changing that did not change this at all. So my normalized method is fine. I'm not going to play with normalizing this to plus or minus square root of 2 yet because I think there's something else in the fractal that makes it generate that way. But let me show you what so the mapper tool has this coloring thing, and this is the algorithm that it uses. Essentially, decides what the elevation is, temperature, weather, and then based on that and some math decides, okay, as we get higher, we get colder, and so on, and then what color should I return? 0 to 1, 0 being, desert as desert can be, and 1 being frozen as frozen can be, just so this map has something to color itself with. And so if I go up here and I return 1 minus t before any of that stuff happens, we'll see what the temperature fractal is telling us. So you're going to have to use your imagination that when this is done, zoomed out like this, it takes a long time. So we're starting to get some of these here. So I already thought about the idea that you should be able to water north and south and eventually get to desert or thing because the temperatures tend to stretch out horizontally. We'll see when this map is done. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. 3 more left. There we go. So you can see the temperature bands where, in this case, I have them flipped upside down. So this is really hot and this is really cold, as you'd expect from these colors. But you can see they stretch into long ranges. It just happens to be that the desert range in this one happens to be over the ocean, which is why you won't see a lot of it, but we do see it on this and this a little bit here. But so I did kind of think of that, but I'm just wondering if I should make it more absolute, like down here somewhere, just have a band where it always goes to max temperature, and up here always goes to min temperature. So no matter how far so if you walk far enough, you're guaranteed to eventually hit that. So that's what the temperature fractal looks like, stretched horizontally. If you want, let's see what the weather fractal wetness is 0 to 1. 0 is no precipitation, 1 is maximum precipitation. So in this case, things that look like desert will be super dry. Things that look like snow will be super wet. I think I've got it normalized to 100 inches per year. That probably doesn't mean anything to you if you don't use freedom units, but that's the way I still think of rain, is inches. Come on, you can do it. You can do it, Mr. Fractal. I know you can. Da, 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 da. So this one tends to stretch up and down. And the reason that is because if you look at the Earth, if you look at a planet that rotates east to west, you tend to get vertical bands of moisture air on one side of a mountain or the other. And while I can't really do that, I mean I could, but it doesn't really give me what I want, because I want to be able to independently sample climate and so on. To simulate that, this fractal stretches north-south so that bands of extremely moist air or moist weather, high precipitation amounts, tend to follow north-south bands. And then of course the temperature follows east-west bands, and then the two combine in different various ways. And so that's how the temperatures and the wetness, precipitation map together. There's also vegetation, which is just sort of a general soil quality that is independent of both of these, and then combines with these two to decide whether a tree or flower grows there, or if nothing grows there. That's where I think I'll end it. I really wanted to get over and do this in Mythruna, but we're already 10 minutes over, and I've just rambled on and on. I hope it was at least educational. If you guys have any last-minute questions, I'll leave it up for a beat. In the meantime, I'm going to go put this back the way it was so that we get the combined weather all together, and maybe you'll see how it comes together a little bit. But so if there's anybody still on and hasn't gotten bored and has any questions, feel free to ask questions. Otherwise, we'll start wrapping it up. My goal this weekend is to fix the coordinate systems, which will break all the worlds. It'll break all my worlds, and so I've been hesitant to do it because I've got lots of test structures and things that are going to get destroyed. So I need to redo how coordinate systems work. Basically make them zero-based also. There's another bit-related thing in the files that I'm going to go ahead and fix while I'm destroying everybody's worlds. But hopefully this will be the last time that I'll have to... I'm trying to make this the last time that I'll have to destroy everyone's worlds if they have existing worlds. Because there's versioning and things, but the problem with this is the change I have to make actually affects the file names themselves in the world database, and that is a really hard problem to fix. And it also affects some of the things that are stored in the entity database as well, which is a really hard problem to fix. Not impossible, but hard, and given that the user base is really small, I don't want to go through that effort when it's just easier to say, hey guys, start your worlds over again. I don't think anybody's done any significant building that they'll be missed. Okay, so that's it. Do we still have anybody on? Did I lose everybody? Oh no, we had 8 views. We still got 1 person on according to this. All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for tagging along. with my meandering. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream. And we'll see you next time. Stop streaming. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Oh, let me go ahead and... I didn't do my little closeout things. So we got to say thanks to everyone. And please like, comment, subscribe. Share with your friends if you think they might be interested in what I'm doing. Maybe they're also working on games that are doing world generation. They might be interested, or just interested in the idea by itself. Anyway, thanks for joining. See you guys on Discord and Twitter and the various other places. Comment on the video if you have something you want to say. Thanks.